The average salary for a UK citizen in full-time work is £36,000, and in the US it's $47,000. The average British adult has £276 of disposable income per month, and they spend $222 on food shopping, $56 on commuting, and $133 on social eating and drinking. A study of 27,000 people across 22 countries determined that money was the main cause of stress for 29% of people. Research also indicates that up to 36% of millennials experience financial stress at levels that would qualify them as suffering from PTSD, and unmanageable debt is commonly cited as a factor in suicide. 15% of Brits have no savings whatsoever, and that figure rises to 53% when you look solely at 22 to 29-year-olds. 40% of those not saving cite insufficient earnings as the reason. The average UK credit card debt per household is £2,655. If they only paid their minimum repayment, it would take 26 years and 9 months to pay off the credit card debt. On average, the total personal debt for the UK accrues around £140 million of interest per day. According to the Financial Conduct Authority, 46% of UK adults classify their knowledge on financial matters as low. So the first real memory I have of anything to do with money is helping my dad with the weekly food shop in a supermarket when I was really little. And at that age, I couldn't really understand why we had to get the supermarket own brand Cocoa Pops as opposed to the proper Kellogg's ones, because obviously there's a massive difference, and that's the shit that matters to you when you're 5 years old. Anyway, this isn't a sob story about how difficult my childhood was. It was fucking great. I'm sure we could have afforded the Kellogg's Cocoa Pops if we really wanted to. However, just because you can doesn't necessarily mean that you should, and that was probably the first real lesson in the value of money that I learned. And since then, I think I've become better with money. I think I'm all right nowadays. Definitely have been irresponsible at times, but I think I've got a decent hold on it. However, if you asked me how much I spend on the typical things on a week by week basis, or even month by month on food shopping, going out, leisurely shit, holidays, whatever it is, I wouldn't have a clue, and I would like to have a clue. And so that is why I decided to track every single penny I spent over the month of November. Now, contrary to what us YouTubers like to do quite often, I don't want this to turn into some just flashy, look at me bullshit video. I want it to actually, at least, if not solely be entertaining, be somewhat helpful, at least for some people. And if you bear with me for a minute, I will explain. Very broadly speaking, you could put most people into one of three categories. Number one, people who don't earn enough to escape financial insecurity. These are people for whom their income isn't sufficient to meet basic needs, or even those who can only just meet those needs but are always in danger of falling below the breadline. This would include a huge range of people, from those born into abject poverty around the world where hunger is a real problem, to those working low-paid jobs here in the UK who maybe have unaffordable financial commitments in the form of children or old parents who depend on them. Number two, people who do technically earn enough money but still experience financial insecurity due to poor money management. These are people with a high enough income to theoretically be comfortable, but who may exercise such poor financial judgment that they often find themselves unable to pay for the basics and in unmanageable debt. Many people with large incomes do fall into this category. Number three, people who don't experience financial insecurity. This could include people such as low earners who have very little outgoings, all the way up to the very richest in society. These people may not necessarily be good with money, but may simply out-earn their spending habits. So note that this is not a scale of earnings, although I'm sure there is some correlation. Some people may earn a lot but still experience financial insecurity, and some may earn relatively little but live comfortably. In short, people in category 3 are fine, so we can essentially disregard them. People in category 1 definitely do need help. Now, some may be in a position to help themselves and some may not be, and therefore would need help from other people and or the state. But that is a whole huge socio-economic problem that we are probably not going to fix with this YouTube video. You can't exactly tell people who don't have enough money to be better with the money. That is like serious levels of patronization. Category 2 is where I really want to focus. Judging by the statistics, that category of people is fairly large, and if we can help a large number of people feel less stressed, well, that's just ideal, isn't it? Because the thing about stress is it actually kills you, and so technically, I mean, it could be said that we out here saving lives. You know, people have in the past referred to me as quote unquote a hero, not my words, you know, their words, I'm just repeating them. It has been known to be said. Before we get into what I actually spent, I just want to give you a brief, oversimplified roundup of how I generally manage my finances. So I have 4 main accounts. Business account 1, this is where all the money I earn comes in. So at the end of each month, I will wipe across a good chunk of this for tax into business account 2. And I'll make sure to overestimate when I do this. Any business expenses also come out of business account 1. I'll then pay myself quite conservatively into current account 1, maybe 1,000 or 2,000 at a time, however often I need it. This is my main account where bills, rent and large payments come out of. From this account, I also drip feed small amounts into current account 2. I use Monzo for this, but there are plenty of online banking apps that you can use. And this is what I use for everyday spending, like food shopping, other bits and bobs that I spend on eating out or anything like that. I like doing it this way because Monzo app totals up how much you've spent each day and also categorizes your spending for you. I also think that actually having to go on and transfer money between accounts when you want to creates a kind of barrier that helps you spend more considerately. Once tax and everything else is paid out of my business accounts, whatever is left can be put towards savings, investments, or pissed up the wall or whatever. That is another conversation. November was pretty typical for the most part, except for a few things. I actually bought some clothes, which is pretty rare. I went for an anniversary meal, booked a weekend in Paris, cooked in a lot and ate out with mates a few times. Anyway, here are the figures. Okay, so I have in front of me the figures and we're going to run through these real quick. So the total spend for the month was £2,626 and 41 pence. Now that is probably a fair bit higher than I would have expected if I would have guessed how much I was going to spend at the start of the month. I split this up into 3 main categories when I was tracking. So there's everyday spending, bills, and then larger / one-off purchases. So I spent 410 on everyday spending. So that's like groceries, a couple of Ubers, haircut, bits and bobs like that. I spent 952 on bills. I think this is pretty reasonable, mainly because I don't actually run a car. I just borrow my brother's car whenever I need to. I live in the city. We have 1 car parking space between us. It would just be complete nonsense for me to run a car right now. Of that 952, 575 of that is my portion of the rent. And then there's phone bill, council tax, a couple of gym memberships, Spotify, Amazon Prime, YouTube Premium, all that kind of shit. Obviously, those things would be the first to go if times got tough because nobody actually needs Amazon Prime. You can just be patient, mate. It's fine. You're just paying £8 a month to be impatient. Anyway, my larger / one-off purchases, this is where I think I definitely spent more than I typically would in a month. So I spent £65 on clothes for myself, which typically is actually a rare occurrence because I usually just wear the clothes that people send me because otherwise I end up with piles and piles of shit. And I feel like inner turmoil about killing the planet, mate. I also bought my girlfriend a bag that was 120. I spent 115 on an anniversary meal, and we booked a weekend away in Paris, and my half of that cost £283. Oh, I also bought a TV that was 400 quid and £144 I spent on a coat. So that was a lot higher than a typical month, and I think usually I would probably spend like, if half that, maybe less. So anyway, I'm doing this video and you can't be waiting for a typical month because an actual typical month might not exist. So if you're ready for some next level Excel skills, I will show you my spending via a pie chart. So this is high-tech shit here. So you can see I spent $223 on groceries, $18.99 on alcohol. Not a big drinker, although I did drink more than that, but my girlfriend paid. $64 on transport, so that's a little bit of petrol, a couple of Ubers. $350 on travel, so that's the Paris trip. Eating out, $268, so again, like, that's pretty high. I ate out like probably 5 times, and so I spent more on 5 meals than I did on the rest of my food for the entire month. $208.99 on clothes, again, that is pretty rare. And then we've got this other, which is $606.20, so that's like the TV and like bag for me bird and shit like that. So a couple of funny ones. I visited Aldi 19 times. That's a horrendous amount to be in Aldi over the course of a month. Like, I am a weirdo. Definitely the staff think I'm a weirdo. The thing is, because I live in the city, it just makes sense. Like, whenever I'm going to the gym or whenever I'm walking around town or anything, it makes sense for me to just do little shops rather than doing one big one. Now I realize it might be more economical to do one big shop, but how much more really? And is it really? I don't know. Who knows, man? Anyway, I spent £9.94 on blueberries. I think that's reasonable. £13.47 on broccoli. One thing I didn't spend any money on, or I spent like £3.50 on, was coffee, because I just got 2 coffees, 2 decafs. Obviously I quit caffeine kind of recently, and I'm sure for a lot of people they probably spend more than that on coffee, so that's saved me a bit of money. That's pretty much it. I am definitely glad that I tracked, because it does highlight shit. It does give you a good kind of idea of if you're being a complete bellend or not. One other thing, this is just personal spending, so there's obviously a few costs related to like work, like I pay an accountant and shit like that I've not included, because that's just not, that's separate, mate. So I understand that parts of this might seem a little bit excessive to some people. Like, if you tell me dad that I spent 270 quid on eating out, he'll fall over, mate. He'll smack me. That's what he'll do. Anyway, for me right now, it's pretty sustainable. I'm being quite responsible, I think, and it's well within the realms of what I can afford, and I suppose that's what you just have to choose for yourself. I try and find a good balance between being stupidly frugal and spending valuable time trying to save a few pence here and there, and then the other end of the spectrum just being a mindless consumer. I think I am quite considerate with my purchases these days, and I only spend money on the stuff that matters to me, and stuff like eating out and spending 12 quid on broccoli. That shit matters to me. So I'm just gonna finish the video up with a couple of little common sense personal finance tips, although I'm not an expert. There's just some basics in case anyone's interested, man. Okay, so as I say, I'm certainly not an expert, certainly not a financial advisor. I'm just doing this YouTube video as an experiment, really, but I will share my limited knowledge and hopefully it helps. So the first thing that I can think of off the top of my head is interest payments, being aware of them, first of all, and trying to avoid them where possible. Now, obviously, there are certain instances where interest is inevitable. For example, mortgage repayments. Unless you're somehow able to buy a property outright, there is going to be some interest attached to your mortgage repayments. But for the vast majority of other things, I would recommend saving up the money and then buying it. Now, there are certain things like sofas and probably computers from certain electrical stores and stuff like that, where you can get 0% interest. So basically you can pay for it over a certain period of time, and as long as you don't exceed the repayment period, you won't have to pay any interest on it. Now, I would say if you are sure that you can make those repayments without incurring the interest, because a lot of time, if you do go over that allotted time, then the interest will get really high and fuck you over. So if you are sure you can repay it, I would say those things are definitely worth doing. Why not? Same goes for a credit card. Now, you might as well use a credit card if you're sure that you can pay off the balance in full every month before you're charged any interest, because obviously then you're protected on your purchases, maybe improving your credit rating, or you could even get certain rewards from certain cards like air miles and whatever else it is. Second thing is definitely related to the first, is being aware of any debts that you have, if you have them, and how they are accruing in terms of interest, so then you can develop a plan to repay them, because a lot of people aren't actually starting from zero. A lot of people are starting from way below zero. And so if you have multiple debts that you're repaying, you need to get a handle on your interest rate for each debt. Now, there are a couple of different methods that people do this. Some people choose to just pay off the one that they owe least on first. So it's like this milestone of, oh, now I've got one less debt on my mind, you know, one less thing to worry about, and knock them off like that. But logically, in terms of total money repaid, you would be better paying off the one that you're paying the most interest on first. But as a general rule, I would say, if you can, just save up for something rather than getting it via a loan or credit card or anything like that, because there's nothing wrong with having to wait a little while for something. And also, the way our kind of consumerist fucking society works is we tell everyone that they can afford anything when they just can't. You know, just because you can walk into a car dealership and drive out in something doesn't mean you can afford it, because the person who's selling it to you is not necessarily a responsible person who gives a fuck if you end up in crippling debt, like. And so just be conscious of it, man. Next thing is savings. So if you're not saving any money whatsoever, you need to fucking start immediately. However little, just start. Even if you put £1 a week away, it is infinitely better than nothing. And you want to work, first of all, towards building what's called an emergency fund. Now, people call it this because essentially it's protecting you against any unexpected financial incursions you may get. So, for example, if your car breaks down and it's going to cost you £500 to fix it, and you need that car to drive back into to work, if you don't have the money, you're going to have to borrow that money. And then borrowing that money isn't just going to cost you however much you borrow, but it's going to cost you the interest on top of it as well. Now, if you have an emergency fund, that's what you just brush off to the side, you keep it in a pot, you don't touch it, you don't use it for anything, it's just for emergencies. And then that's your get out the shit fund, basically, if you ever need to. Now, beyond the emergency fund, then you want to start working towards a bit of a kind of lifestyle buffer. So I would say start working towards having 3 months of your total bills just sat there in an account in savings. So for example, if you lose your job, you work out how much your rent is, how much it is to pay your bills and everything else, times it by 3, and then that's your target, right? And then if you lose your job, you've at least got 3 months then to sort shit out, get back on your feet, you know, and you're not like gonna end up homeless and mad shit like that. Like, it's not even a joke, you know what I mean? And then once you've saved towards 3 months, you can save towards 6 months, then eventually towards 12 months, and then you've got like a nice fucking bit of money, and then you don't feel, you know what I mean, your boss gives you a bit of shit, you can be like, fuck you, I quit, and take a shit on his desk. Anyway, so that's saving. Another huge thing actually that I should have said a long time ago is actually tracking your spending, just like I did now. I didn't know I was spending that much. And even if it's just as an exercise, even if you don't plan on changing anything and you feel completely comfortable and you're like, ah, it's fine, I'm not, you know, my finances are in a great state, whatever, it's still just interesting to know and get a grasp on it. But especially if you're kind of teetering around, you know, if you're getting paid and then ending up back down close to zero before you get paid again, fair enough, it might be that your means you just don't have enough. That might be the case. What is also possible is that you think that's the case when actually you're just pissing money around everywhere. You want to scroll through your bank statements and see if there's any kind of old standing orders that are coming out for, you know, maybe you're paying for a Netflix subscription that your fucking ex-girlfriend's now watching with a new fella and you never watch it, or whatever it is, you know what I mean? So definitely keeping a close eye on stuff and tracking it would help a lot. Okay, this is just another thing. I don't know if this is really a tip, but I just want to touch on the whole fucking consumerist fucking bubble that we live in, because I need to weigh in on it a little bit. So personally, I am quite a believer in individual liberty and in the individual's right to choose an individual freedom, and I do think that I'm probably more on the free market capitalist side of the argument. However, if you are going to entrust people with the responsibility to choose how they spend their money, then there needs to be a level of education, because with individual freedom comes individual responsibility to act as a responsible adult. Now, in a perfect world, everyone would be well educated on all the financial choices that they are having put in front of them, so that then they are able to choose wisely and, you know, the best wins in the economy. So I actually think that kids in school should learn about the whole keeping up with the Joneses and pointless shit like that. I'm not against buying a new pair of trainers. I'm not against you having a wall full of rare fucking trainers that cost you 700 quid each. I'm not gonna judge you for that whatsoever. If that is a conscious choice that you've made because this is something that brings you happiness and, you know, that you actually derive some sense of value from, because you have to like something, you have to be into something, do you know what I mean? If you're into fucking rare iguanas, then be into them. But and I wouldn't say, oh, that's a waste of money, don't buy a rare iguana. That's fine, but it has to be a conscious choice that you've made yourself, and not something that you're basing on like, oh well, my mate just got this new fucking iguana from the jungles of Belize and now I need to keep up. You know, not this keeping up with the Joneses shit, because keeping up with the Joneses comes from, it was the Joneses who lived next door or lived across the road, and Mr. fucking Jones gets a bang new fucking BMW or something, and now all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, I need one. Or like, he's got a new lawnmower and you're like, shit, I'm here with me shit lawnmower, now I need a good lawnmower. And it's like the kind of social pressure to keep up, right? But now, the Joneses, they're in there, mate, and there's 7 billion of them. There's 7 billion Joneses right fucking there. And if you feel like you need to keep up with them, stop. You know, because it's a bullshit cycle. And honestly, I feel bad for people. I don't know if this is PC. I feel worse for girls because I feel like they get sucked into it a bit more. There's a bit more kind of image kind of attached to the whole female influencer realm, I think. Maybe it's just the same except manifest different ways, but just be conscious, man. Just be conscious of, like, if you're buying something or spending money on something because you think it's really gonna improve your life and bring you value, or if you just wanna post a picture of it on Instagram. Yeah, so would you buy it if you couldn't post it on Instagram? There you go, think about that. Right, I think that's it. I think I've said my piece. That's all I can think of off the top of my head, but if you've got other suggestions, anything you wanna add, throw them in the comments. Everyone subscribe to my shit, like my shit. See you later.
Jordan Lenny is my hero.